Now, for more on last month's record-high exports, we're joined today by Professor Shin Se-don, professor at the Division of Business Economics at Sookmyung Women's University. Professor Shin, thanks for coming on today.
Good morning.
So Korea's exports reached a record high last month and it surpassed the $100 billion mark for the first time. How significant is this milestone, and do you expect this momentum to continue in the coming months?
I would say this is pretty monumental in the sense that we never had a $100 billion monthly export throughout our entire economic history, and that is one thing. And also, we are expecting to reach $1 trillion exports for the year 2026. So it's just pretty monumental, and it is good sign that, this year's economic growth will possibly reach 3%. In the case when, everybody expected that it's going to be very difficult to reach 2% economic growth, early this year. So I think, monumental achievement.
I see. And turning to the foreign exchange market, the Japanese yen has fallen to its lowest level in 40 years, right? What's behind this move?
Well, I will point out two things. One is that the Japanese interest rate has been very low, mostly in the negative just 2 years ago. And then they decided to raise it slowly, very slowly, now at the 1% point, which is about, 2.5% lower than the United States. So I think the lowest Japanese interest rate is the prime reason for the weakest yen on the one hand. And another potential possibility is that United States is going to raise, rate hike this year, at least once. So on the one hand, the Japanese interest rate has been too low, and on the other, United States is expected to raise their interest rate. And that, I think, is going to increase the rate gap between United States and Japan, and that's going to trigger, Japanese exchange rate go up still further above 160.
I see. And the Korean won is also at its weakest level in more than a decade. And some analysts say the exchange rate could even go over 1,600 Korean won in the second half of this year. What's your take on this?
Well, 1,600 could be possible, for a few days, maintaining at the level. But on the average, it's going to be very difficult to stay above 1,550. So I think even if, the rate goes up beyond the 1,600, that's going to be a pretty short term kind of interruption. And mostly, I think the rate will be staying around 1,500 and 1,550. So I think it's going to stabilize sooner or later, throughout the latter half of 2026.
Right, and in the stock market, it's been 30 years since the KOSDAQ market was launched in 1996. But while the KOSPI surged 98% so far this year, the KOSDAQ has remained largely flat. Why has the KOSDAQ struggled to regain investors' trust?
Well, as you know, KOSDAQ is composed of hundreds of small and medium-sized enterprise, and contrast to the big, corporations like Samsung or Hynix, small and medium-sized enterprises lack, human power, and also deficient in capital, and deficient in government support, and deficient in technology. So for the last 30 years, the index has been staying around 1,000. Currently, below 100,000. So KOSDAQ has a fundamental inherent kind of deficiencies, and that I think has caused the people to not to believe in the strength of KOSDAQ. So it's going to be a long task for the government if government wants to kind of revitalize KOSDAQ, but fundamentally it's going to be a very difficult challenge for the government.
I see. It really is a complicated issue. All right, Professor Shin, thank you so much for coming on today. We appreciate it.
My pleasure.